co-host of the Centre Court MBA Festival, John Byrne. When we first started this whole venture 6-7 years ago, we said, can we bring together the world's top business schools? And that's one of the features of the event, I think, to have this dialogue with senior leaders, with students, with career services from top MBA programs from all over the world. And one school that you may have been keeping a track on, because it just keeps going up in every ranking that is out there, is the IESE Business School in Barcelona. It's a great pleasure to welcome back Marc Badia. Marc is the Associate Dean of the MBA and Master's programs at IESE, also a professor at the school. Marc, it's great to see you again. And you've got the IESE, there we go. There's the logo.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Thank you for having me. Yes.
I talked about being both a professor and, of course, your leadership role. So you get to see, many dimensions of IESE Business School. What do you most enjoy about the school?
What I enjoy the most, let's say, in my position as associate dean for the MBA and the MEAN programs, is to be constantly in touch with the new generations of students year after year, and it's something that keeps me on my toes, because at the end of the day, you have them here 24/7, and every year the process starts again, and you have to start anew, basically, right? With obviously always improving and introducing new things, but it's always a new generation with new aspirations, new concerns, and the experience is always different because, the character of the different sections and everything, it changes. And so one of the things I try to do actually still, I'm not supposed to do it, right? But I still teach in the MBA, and I teach a couple of sections in the very first term because I teach financial accounting. And that gives me an opportunity first to earn their trust in the beginning, and also to get to know them from the very beginning, which proves to be very useful later on for managing many things that take place in the MBA. And it also gives me this experience of witnessing the transformation process they undergo, this from the beginning, let's say from orientation week, when I have to address them as well in the beginning, right? Till graduation that we had last week here with the second years, right? And so in this long process, I get to see many of them that I've met from the beginning. And that's something that for me is fulfilling. I don't know. And this cycle repeats and repeats all over again. So the cool thing is that you can improve always. Next year, let's start again. Let's improve things. Let's being up to date, being in touch with faculty, state of the art knowledge that we want to introduce, being in contact with recruiters, what are the needs that they have, closing the gap between student and recruiters. I love this process and all the learning that comes with it. Yeah.
Well, the heritage of the school, with Harvard in your background, a 2-year program and very distinct in terms of the European market for that. And you get to see those students in the first weeks and then this journey. And I'd like to talk a lot more about this in our discussion together. But even just as you describe IESE, whether to friends or to future applicants to the school, it's very values driven. There's innovation, there's leadership, there's something for everybody. How do you like to describe IESE?
Okay. So, well, on the one hand, we would say that it's like a sort of safe lab, like many other business schools, right? A safe lab where we try to replicate real life business decisions, right? Situations to train people in decision making. And especially in our case, because we use the case method and it's super intensive, all the classes in case method and another, let's say, experiential learning always. And so at the end of the day, it's a matter of training people in making decisions one after the other and exposing them to the highest number of possibilities. This is why one of the things that we try to have is a very diverse student group. We have people from 60 different countries. 85% of the students are international. And that brings all this richness in the class, in the discussion, in the viewpoints, and that's critical, especially when you use the case method. I think that comes into play and in a very nice way, right? And then we are a safe lab as well in terms of producing knowledge, state-of-the-art knowledge, because we are a research institution, and that's something that we can never forget. And I think it's something that students benefit from, because that our faculty has to be in constant touch with the things that are happening in academia. And obviously, we try to be relevant as well. And so they have to be in touch as well with the real world, and with consulting jobs or advising companies, whatever it is. But I would say that, we are sort of safe lab where all of this is happening. And as you said, a mission-driven school at the same time, where we have a strong emphasis, let's say, on ethics or responsible leadership, so to speak. and the societal impact that business can have, so we believe that business is a force for good, and, to do let's say, make a difference in the world, you don't need to go to an NGO or non-for-profits. I mean, from the corporate world, I mean, you can do, I even would argue that you can do even much more, you know, because of the influences and the global, let's say, scope of many of these companies.
Mm. With so many of those dimensions, I talked about the school's recognition, global recognition and success in rankings that look at the research capacity of the institution. They look at the aims achieved of your students. They look at a focus on sustainability. So obviously our viewers themselves are thinking about their next steps. What is distinctive? There's the case method, there's the course length. Why does that make it such a magical mix at IESE?
Yeah, I think that teaching quality, it's something that is not captured by ranking sometimes when we think about the quality of the teaching itself. And to me, that's something fundamental. And by the way, I know that's something distinctive at IESE, because when my students go on exchange and they come back in the second year, and they've been to some of the top schools in the US and elsewhere, right? And they tell me, look, on average, I think that the quality of teaching here of the core curriculum, this is what they experience in the first year, is very high. And actually in the core curriculum, we only have tenure track professors. We really take care of that very much. And what is the secret? Because at the end of the day, it's not that we have better faculty. It's a matter, I would say, of two things. One is the mission of the school. So all the faculty that comes here, they know that we have a self-selection of faculty that know that they have to care about students. I mean, the student is not what gets between you and your research. The student is the object of your work, basically, and we want to have an impact on these students. And there is all this transformational process. This is why we want to have a long program as well, so that we can really have an influence here and impact. And the second, let's say, secret of the teaching quality is the case method, because at the end of the day, I think that the case method requires a lot of preparation on the faculty side and a lot of passing on this tradition. Just to give you an example, I remember when I started teaching a long time ago that for each session that I was teaching, I had a senior member of the faculty of my department that was devoting to me 3 hours. You know, he was spending 3 hours with me and say, well, I would do this, I would do that. You know, I was teaching in front of him and he shared all the materials with me. And so we have this tradition as well of passing all this trade, because for us, it's very important, especially because we have a lot of executive education as well. So a professor has to teach in the MBA, in executive education, everywhere. And the same professor should be able to do that, right? So and those things really help us. And we pay a lot of attention basically to the quality of our academics. Even in the second year with all the electives, for example, we have like 90 different electives, especially designed for MBAs. So we don't share them with any other program, it's just for the MBAs. And then I would say in terms of other differentials, I don't know, differential, I mean, depends. For example, in terms of diversity, obviously everyone talks about diversity, but here, as I was telling you before, you know, 60 different countries, 85% of international students, sometimes we sacrifice, if necessary, a little bit of GMAT, let's say, if someone really brings something interesting to the classroom. Because having a diverse student body is essential for case method, because at the end of the day, you want to expose people to as many possibilities as possible, as to many viewpoints, as I said before, and so that's critical, and that's something that we really pay attention to. And the third thing, I would say, human touch. Let's see, let me explain that, okay? So we talked before about, so we understand business, that business is for people and not people for business, basically, and at the end of the center of any business decision, obviously, we're talking about people, not just, let's say, other people that will be affected by our decisions, but even the decision maker is affected by the decision, because we are what we do, right? And so by taking certain kind of decisions, we are turning into a certain kind of person, and all these reflections in all sorts of courses, not just in ethics, but also in my course in financial accounting, there will be cases where we introduce always this dimension that has to do with the ethical dimension of decision making. And the spirit of service, which is something that for me is essential, especially for leadership. And that's something that students have to see, not just in the cases in the classroom, they have to see it in the people working here, staff, faculty, which is challenging because we have to live up to these values. And we don't know, we're not always successful doing that, but at least they have to see that we struggle, basically, to strive for that spirit of service, you know, and that's something. And from this, you derive other things like sustainability, right? Why caring about sustainability? Well, at the moment, you really care about people and you understand that business is much more than making money. Obviously, sustainability comes naturally. I mean, anyway, so teaching quality, for us, academics super important, academic excellence, the diversity of the student body and faculty, right? And finally, the human touch, so to speak. I don't know, yeah.
Right. I suppose as you talked about those first weeks and welcoming individuals onto campus, it is such a personal journey, and you've shared the very student-centric approach that IESE takes. So with all of the core courses, skills that they're developing, they can then expand that into their elective choices in year 2. What do you see in that journey in terms of their personal development and leadership? Is that something, as you then look at them 2 years later, that is really striking to you, how they've grown as a person?
Yes, I mean, yeah, it's interesting that you ask, because one of the things that happens is that in the first term, after a few weeks, some students are a little bit confused in the sense that because we use the case method, and it's not like in every class we do like, okay, these were the learning points. Sure, many times you do some sort of summary at the end, a wrap up, but some other times there are no wrap ups, you know? And all of a sudden you've seen all these sequence of cases and situations, and people have a sense of, am I learning anything? I mean, where is the content? And I think that the answer is, look, if you want content, buy a book or watch a Coursera video or ask ChatGPT. I mean, this is not about just delivering content, because if not, we would be out of business, I think. What we really care about is what I said before, you know, training people to make decisions and basically develop what, I don't know, I would call like AI-proof capabilities, you know, that will set you apart and that will prepare you for leadership positions. And I'm talking about values, I'm talking about virtues, obviously habits, you know, I'm talking about attitudes. I'm talking about developing good judgment, which is very difficult. And I'm not saying here capacity of analysis, or because this, I mean, yes, AI can do it, you know. I'm talking more about judgment, you know, like making decisions that in situations where people are involved, and therefore they are not deterministic situations. So it's not like an AI can give you very good decisions if everything is fixed, is deterministic. But when you have people involved, I mean, people learn. People, every time, they can react differently to the same situation, right? And so at that moment is when you have all this good judgment that, to be honest, is very difficult to develop. And you develop it by training it. And I think that the case method provides you precisely, and simulations and experiential learning in general, this context in which you can train something that normally comes, it's not that you're born with it, but it comes from your education at home and everything. It's very difficult to change. And the only way to change it is training with hundreds of decisions that you have to make, right? And little by little developing this common sense, this judgment. And I see that happening in a slow way. And so students in the second term, they already realize that they are faster to process things, that they really focus on what is important, and then they can discard things that are not so important, that to prepare a case doesn't take as long as in the beginning, right? For many reasons, but they also realize that they feel like sort of empowered, especially in the second year, to say, it doesn't matter if it's a business situation or a life situation, I stop, I can analyze the situation, generate alternatives, think about the criteria, decide based on that criteria, develop an action plan. And all this comes as second nature. And that's the kind of process that we see, and that you will not see in any single course, but at the end, after some time, you realize that it's happening, you know. I don't know. I think that's one of the experiences I've had with students.
So we bring all of that together, and I love the idea of an AI-proof career, yes. But good judgment, responsible leadership, and business as a force for good, a sense of service, you know, with all of that, as they then come through the program and the training that you're exposing them to. What is your advice to them as they then start the next steps of their career and they're taking all of this from IESE with them? So
you're saying once they finish, once they graduate?
With everything that they've picked up.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I was thinking, we had the graduation last week, and so I had to deliver the speech as the academic director of the MBA program. One of the speeches. And one of the things that I focus on is, look, there is something that is very basic. I mean, very much in the beginning, even before we talk about these other skills and things that you have developed, right? Which is basically being trustworthy. Being trustworthy means, on the one hand, to be reliable, and therefore you need this preparation, professional preparation, really know the stuff you're working on and your industry and your business, whatever you need, right, to know. But at the same time, it has to do with, well, generating distrust in terms of being authentic so that people can see through that you don't have another agenda, that people trust you because they realize that you are real, you're a real leader, and you are humble. I think that humility is very much at the base. And so that would be like the very first thing. In any society, if you don't have trust, I mean, things don't work, or the economy, or a company. I mean, so that's a very basic thing. And some people transmit trust, and maybe there are people who don't. And sometimes it's not because they are not trustworthy, probably necessarily, but because they don't, because trustworthiness is a perception also by the person that works with you, right? And so maybe it's that it doesn't come across for some number of reasons, things that we can improve sometimes, that have to do with humility and being, being real, authentic, right? Anyway, so that's one of the things that I mentioned there. But then if I had to summarize like leadership skills that you really have to keep in your career, first, the service mindset, and you already mentioned it, right? For me, it's a mindset, service, right? At the end of the day, when you start a path of leadership, this is not about you and your career anymore. This is about the people you're going to serve, about, well, company or the life of other people, And so you have made a radical decision of living a life for the others, not for yourself. I think that's something basic that we need to learn because it's an attitude that we need to develop over time. And hopefully here in the school, it's the beginning of this. Well, hopefully it's a continuation of, because we also make a selection of people who understand that, right? That their life is a service to others, right? And that's real leadership. If you think about it, well, anyway, I want to, but for example, in life, this is what happens in a natural way. When we are kids, we are selfish. We cry until we get what we want, what we need. When we go into teenage years, we discover that there are other people. We fall in love for the first time. We realize that people who have needs, and if we are properly educated, we'll do something to help other people, right? Later on, maybe we get married, and that's all of a sudden your life is not about yourself anymore. You're living with someone else, sharing that life and common goals, etc. And then you have children, maybe, and then you totally forget. Life leads you to forget about yourself and to serve others, right? And I think that leadership, at the end of the day, taking responsibilities for a group of people, for a company, it's the same story. And this has to be something that either you take it as a radical decision in life, or you're going to suffer because you'll be intentional, like, oh, this is my agenda, my things, and it's not possible to have both at the same time. And then there are other skills, obviously, that are useful. Communication we will always be essential. First of all, listening, learning how to listen, right? But communication skills, interpersonal skills, because you need to move people, motivate people, move them to the common goals that you have in the company, right? And what we mentioned about judgment before. And as I said before, these three things that I mentioned, the spirit of service or the service mindset, this communication and interpersonal skills, and the judgment, it's not something that AI can provide anytime soon, at least. I don't think that's what AI does, right? And so this is why I'm saying this is going to be differential. This is going really what's going to add value to wherever you go to work, right? Yeah.
You talk about falling in love as a teenager. I think that you could probably fall in love with Barcelona at any age. But just with, thoughts of trust and humility and service. So when students at the end of the program come back to you and say, Marc, my 2 years at IESE, are these the things you think that are enduring, that they really take, they've got an extraordinary network, lifelong friendships? Yes, they have additional skill sets that they'll be able to use professionally. But do you really see these sort of values that you're describing, something that's going to sort of make them a better person for the rest of their life? Not just salaries that they'll earn, but it's making you a better person.
It's very difficult to measure that. I have one advantage is that I get to meet many alumni. Just 2 weeks ago, we had this alumni reunion. Every 5 years, people come, every 10, 15 years. I mean, they come here on campus, back to campus. And you have the opportunity also to follow up on many of these people. With some of them, obviously, we have friendships. I think here for now, since 2008, right? And in the MBA, both in the MBA since 2015, maybe, first with the first year, then with the full program. So I've been teaching many people that then you see the evolution. And I think that they've had the opportunity here at IESE for sure to reflect about all these things, because at the end of the day, obviously, this is a very personal decision that you say, look, you really need to, when they are here in the school, it's an opportunity they have, because we have a long program for a specific reason, which is the first year is super busy. There is no time for anything. They are in this bubble where they are all day long thinking about the internships, about the cases and everything else. They are overwhelmed, and it's part of the process. And the first thing I tell them in the beginning is trust the process, right? And obviously they are skeptical in the beginning, but in any case, so they are super overwhelmed in the first year. So this is why we need the second year, where they can choose their own program. They can decide what electives, the international modules, whatever, but to have time precisely for reflection about what is important in their lives and how to build like a meaningful life. And that will be based on decisions that they are making now, right? So the kind of person they are going to be 5, 10, 20 years down the road depends very much on decisions they are making today. And so they need to set a strategy, allocate resources, and also put some KPIs, because many times the problem nowadays is that you are measured by the results, and maybe the most important things in this life are very difficult to measure. I don't know, the education of your children. I mean, you will realize 20 years down the road that this didn't work. Well, too late. And so, and it's very difficult to measure the results in the short period, in the short time, right? And so what you need to do is to measure your efforts. What are you doing for this to happen, to get the right outcome at the end? And so the first thing is to identify what is important in your life. It's going to be your family, the education of your children. And at the end of the day, if you think about the portfolio of happiness, probably there are 4 things that have to do with meaningful relationships, with family, that has to do with faith, but I'm not saying faith in a religious way necessarily, but in a sort of abstracting from reality to observe things with a little bit more of perspective. So having this contemplative mindset that allows you to say, hey, wait a second, I mean, this is not so serious, or this is, let's acquire real perspective of life, and then meaningful work, of course. And meaningful work doesn't mean it's not about making money or having a career. It has to do with service, as I said before. It has to do with the kind of relationships you develop in that work. And it has to do with the craft, with the excellence that you put in that work, right? So meaningful work, and that's it, family, friends, meaningful work, and faith somehow. So I'm saying, okay, based on what's going to be important in your life, set the strategy for life. And the MBA is such a great opportunity to do that, because things will only get more complicated. And that's what I encourage my students to do in the second year. So that,
I suppose that speaks to, you described in the beginning, the safe laboratory and how they can test all of this. And when you speak to meaningful relationships, perhaps that brings us back to the innate diversity, not just 60 nationalities or gender diversity, but when you look at what that diversity brings to the IESE experience, why does it make such a difference? And what is the school doing to continue to support that pipeline of diversity?
Yeah, I think that, so diversity, obviously, if you think about the importance of it, diversity in itself, it's not a value, let's say. Diversity is something that helps you for something else, right? And I would say 2 things. So diversity for us is important. There is an element of, let's say, I don't know if justice is the right word, because sometimes it's a charged word, right? But there is an element of saying, obviously, we want to bring people here who might not have these kind of opportunities, or life has been very difficult, for them. They've had a lot of obstacles. And now if we can help them to come and have access to this kind of education, top education, we understand that these people will have a lot of impact, social impact. Why? Because they are especially equipped to understand the problems and needs of other people, because they have undergone different similar situations, they have experienced similar situations. And so I think that there is this part that has to do with, we want this kind of people because they are in tune with the needs of other people. It's not the only way, of course, to have this, right? But I'm saying they will be sensitive to all this, and we want to give them opportunities. And so there is this justice element, if you want, right? But then there is a pragmatic, let's say, sort of reason, which is that if in the classroom we want to replicate as many scenarios as possible, real scenarios that they can encounter in global corporations like we have nowadays, right, where they work with people from all over the place, well, we need to bring as many diverse backgrounds as possible, so that we have this, at the end of the day, cognitive, let's say, diversity, right, that will come from many different identity dimensions, if you want, but at the end of the day, it's a sort of cognitive variation in the class that exposes you to many viewpoints, to people who totally disagree with you. I see it, maybe it's a bad example, but I see like when we are training now, they are training these AI, these language models, large language models, right? The information set that you use for the training is the most important thing, because at the end of the day, it looks like these algorithms, they are quite similar. It's sort of a commodity at the end, right? I'm sure that they will have different tweaks and things, but at the end of the day, what matters is the training set that you have been using. Well, I would say that here, I mean, obviously a different situation, but the training set, we can create a richer training set having more diversity in the classroom, right? Now, obviously that's easy to say. We want to bring as many people as possible with very diverse backgrounds. Now, the challenge nowadays, as you know, is that requires a lot of scholarships. And especially because, for example, it's super challenging to attract students from the good students from Africa, the African continent, right? Why? Because, I mean, the pool, maybe it's not so big at this point, let's say, because not so many people maybe are ready for that step. And many schools are interested in having that same representation in the classroom, right? And so scholarships are important. Not only that, and also to eliminate, and that's something that I've noticed, that people coming from certain countries experience a lot of obstacles and hurdles in our Western society sometimes, just because of the country where they come, things related to visas, things related even to the everyday life that they find challenging for a number of reasons. And so another thing that we are working on is to eliminate these kind of frictions, let's say, for people who come from other countries that, especially that have problems with visas and things like this, you know, with the internships, with all sorts of things. So that's super important, because I mean, with just a scholarship and then you bring them here, it's not enough, you know. And then also then making sure that with these people that come from different places, that we have different challenges, also cultural challenges. For example, speaking in class, you know, case method. Well, there are certain cultures, especially from Asian countries, that they have it more challenging because of the culture they come from. And then we have to help them and give them a special training and sessions to help them with that. You know, for example, our communication workshop is in the very first weeks of the program, even before they start with the case method, because it's a way for them to feel more comfortable in the group, to speak in public, and all these kind of things. But you always have to think about the people you are trying to attract and the frictions they experience in all this process, basically. Yeah.
And that added dimension, not just diversity and its many measures, but the inclusion, whether it's for the Asian student and communication, but on all of those levels. So you work very long hours. You have a passion for what you do. This is true of every member of the IESE staff that I've ever met, and the efforts that you make, you know, to bring in these extraordinary groups of diverse, talented individuals. And as you said at the beginning, if it was just content, well, you could buy a book or you could, you know, follow an online course. So as you think about that chemistry, the magic that takes place in the classroom at IESE, how do you see that continuing to evolve? And you know, graduate management education and the MBA, how is that going to continue to evolve in the coming years?
Yeah, I think that one of the topics that is in everyone's, I don't know, agenda and mine is everything that has to do with lifelong learning, right? I mean, how do you give a continuation to all this process? Obviously, we have a long program, 2 years, around 20 months. Precisely because we believe that we want to have an impact, and we believe that we need time, you know, especially time that in the second year that is more peaceful for people to, you know, think about all these important topics. But obviously here the holy grail and that everyone is thinking about is how to continue this. And it's not a matter of business. It's really a matter of saying, being relevant for people at different stages in their careers. And that, I don't know, maybe in the future we'll see, and we already see all this stackability, right, of the different courses and things that you can use over time, these different modules and things, precisely, maybe because maybe they don't need to have all the courses right now, all of a sudden, you know, in 2 years. Maybe you can do this in a period of time, and especially with relevant things at each moment of their careers, right? This is something that I think everyone is working on. Super challenging because on the one hand, you want to personalize, but obviously there is always a trade-off here, you know, because you have to do this with a cost-effective delivery. And sure, artificial intelligence will help us with that. I'm sure it will, you know. But at the end of the day, yeah, there has to be some sort of certain degree of customization and personalization and people involved, I suppose, in some, yeah, and maybe in some things that will be more premium, that has to do more with mentoring or things that can be done in community, that with other alumni, you know, among themselves. But obviously, that's something that we really need to work on. And I think it will be like, well, it's something that everyone is working on. And I think it's going to change in the future, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is obviously having a very experiential program. And I think that's, as I told you before, for me, the case method is part of this experiential learning. But then obviously simulations or projects with real projects with companies, right? And all this contact with the real world. I mean, that's obviously something essential to me. Because as we said before, content is something that you can get somewhere else. And you already have all these online new courses and programs and things that can provide that, you know?
Right. Well, you know, that theme of lifelong learning makes me reflect on lifelong friendships, lifelong network, and becoming part of this vibrant IESE community. So for our viewers at Centre Court and their next steps, connecting with you, with your colleagues in admissions, talking to students and alumni, how do you encourage them to find out more about the school?
So my advice would be well, two things. First, so in the search process, as you say, you know, to find out more about the school, I would encourage people to do the due diligence of any school because they are going to spend like maybe 2 years of their lives, lots of resources, a lot of money, you know. And so it's not just that, okay, that this school is top ranked in some rankings, fine, you know, but it's not that this school has access to top recruiters. I think this is a commodity. This should be true of any top business school, right? But the thing is that you're going to spend for 2 years of your life there. You're going to have like a learning experience, a transformation process. And I think that the kind of due diligence people have to do has to do with meeting the people. So visit the program if it's possible, right? And first, what is your experience in the admissions process, right? I mean, how are you treated in the admissions process? Because that will give you light about what you're experiencing the next 2 years. The problem with the MBA is that an experiential program that you only can buy once, you only buy once in your life, right? So and you don't know upfront what you're going to find, right? And so the more that you can get into this experience ex ante, the better. And I would say, how is your admissions process? How are you treated, right? Whenever possible, visit the school, attend a class, meet the students there. What is the atmosphere? How make you feel? How do they make you feel, you know, in the classroom? Obviously, even I would say check the cafeteria, the security, all the staff working there. I mean, are they motivated? How they are treating you? Because it's part of the culture of the place as well that you're going to experience for 2 years. It's going to be your second home, you know, for a while, or the first home for some people, you know, for those 2 years. Even how the facilities, not so much about whether they are, I don't know, state-of-the-art facilities, but are they well kept? Do they take good care of the facilities? Are they clean? Are they attractive? A place that where I would spend a lot of time, you know. And I would say, last thing, contact the alumni, and a good number of alumni, and see first how many of them respond, and second, how they treat you. Of course, again, same story, right? How they speak about the school, and no one is going to say bad things of their own school, of course, because everyone is happy with the school, right? But you will detect those that speak with passion and love about the school and the experience that they had, and I think that's something. So at the end of the day, you have to find your feet, and you have to do due diligence, and it has to do very much with the people, you know. And so I would encourage people to do that for sure.
Right. You've reminded me, Marc, of the very first conversation with John, co-founding Centre Court together. We said, okay, the top business schools of the world, and let's have great conversations. This was a great conversation. You've taken us on a journey through trust, meaning to your life, happiness, sense of purpose, respect for others, respect for yourself, to be able to capture that at Centre Court, which, you know, we can look at rankings, of course, on the website. You have so much information about career opportunities, but thank you for sharing with us your passion for the school. It's absolutely palpable. And I'm sure, you know, people will want to follow up, speak with the alum, come and visit the school if they can. That would be a great opportunity. Yeah. So thank you for bringing so much energy and such a great conversation to Centre Court.
No, thank you for the opportunity. And also, you're also welcome to do your due diligence if you ever want to come to Barcelona. So
I'll take you up on that. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.